This is the Bringing Business to Retail podcast with today's guest, Scott Tomas from Creatively Squared.
Welcome to the Bringing Business to Retail podcast on SelenaKnight.com. Stay ahead of the competition by opening your doors to business experts so you can learn, grow, and be inspired. Passionate about bringing business strategies to independent retailers, please welcome your host, Selena Knight.
Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. Now, I don't know about you, but I really struggle when it comes to graphics. I've probably talked before about how I have this fantastic graphic designer, Janelle, and she helps me with all things business, whether it's logos, whether it's creating images for our website, whether it's just images for social media. I'm really lucky to have her on board because it is one of those areas in my business that I really struggle with, and I can easily get sucked into the vortex. I mean, if you get me on Canva, I can spend hours creating something which in the end looks a little bit crap, let's be honest. And when it comes to photos, I don't know. I just don't have that skill, which is funny because in my younger days, I actually used to do quite a lot of photography. And I don't know, somewhere along the line, I just seemed to lose that ability, and maybe I could pick it up again, but I lost that ability to actually just be able to frame a really good picture. And on top of all of that, I really struggle to put together a concept. Now, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but you know how when people who are really good at putting creative together, that's like the technical word for it, who are really good at putting creative together, they just know what goes well. And I'm assuming I'm the only person who has problems with this because this is why websites like Creative Market and all those stock photo sites exist, chock full of the desk pictures with the blank space for you to type your stuff in. All those mock-ups that we use to make our Instagram and our Pinterest look better. So when I met Scott, I was really excited about what his company does because not only do they put this kind of creative together, they can shoot for your website, they can shoot for your social profiles, they really get on board with what your brand is trying to convey when it comes to your products and your social media. Now, what I also loved about Scott was the fact that his business model means that everybody gets paid. In this gig economy that we live in, it can be really easy to succumb to putting a job out there and just getting a bunch of replies. But someone somewhere is missing out. So I love that Scott's business is all about making sure that not only you, as the person who's hiring the creatives, gets exactly what they're looking for, but that those creatives are just as well paid. Because I don't know about you, but I am really tired of seeing people who ask for exposure. You know, they ask for product or they ask for services in exchange for exposure. Exposure doesn't pay the bills, guys. So it is all about living in a world where we are happy to pay for the services that we are using. So Scott is going to tell you all about how you can use creative, so how you can use visual imagery to surprise and delight your customers. But before we jump in, I wanted to give a great big shout out to Dawn Lewis Imagery. Dawn was kind enough to write a review about the podcast. And Dawn says, well, first of all, Dawn gives us 5 stars with the title A Retailer's Dream Come True. Dawn says, this has been my podcast find of the year. So much helpful information, a great variety of guests and topics, and a must listen for anyone with a retail store, be it bricks and mortar or online. Thank you, Dawn. I love reading reviews. And I would love it if you could leave a review. Simply tap the review button on iTunes or Stitcher and just pop a little something in there, even if it's just to hopefully give us 5 stars. Now, that review button in your podcast app will mean when you've left a little review, you could be featured on the show. And if you don't have time to leave a review, make sure you snap a pic where you're listening to this and tag me on Instagram. Let me know what you love about today's episode. Okay, so let's jump in to this episode all about visual content and visual imagery with Scott Tomas from Creatively Squared. Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. We all know that retail is visual. And when it comes to visual marketing, whether you feel creatively challenged, like I do, or you're super comfortable with creating images for your brand, we can always grow by having some expert advice thrown our way. So I've brought Scott Tomas from Creatively Squared onto the podcast to talk all things visual marketing. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about Creatively Squared.
Sure. So Creatively Squared, we founded the company 18 months ago. And what we do is we match brands with content creators around the world to do custom visual content. So brand supplies a brief, and according to that, we go and identify their social channels, the written brief they supply, their website, and we use all that data as well as our internal analytics to go and match them with the right content creators, no matter where they're located in the world, from our community that's pushing 20,000 now globally.
So what kind of images would they take? Like, are we talking about just images to put on a website? Or are we talking images for a promotional campaign or just social media? Like, what kind of images would your people make for their customers?
Yeah, so we specialize in styled imagery. So it's not the straight product shot with the white background. What we do, rather than conveying what the product is, we try to add emotion on why you should buy it. So rather than getting a studio and a set and a photographer to create that kind of content, we just try to match you with people that already have the right aesthetic. So for instance, we had one company came to us that was selling kids' nightlights, and so their quote was 20,000 Australian dollars. Because they had to go and set up a bedroom studio and get all the props and the set and everything. So instead of that, our platform matched them with 3 content creators around the world that had fantastic looking kids' bedrooms. So they already have the props, they already have the right aesthetic. We just put the products in those locations and let these expert content creators come up with something that looks amazing.
Wow, and I guess the great thing about that is it's just not formulaic. You get different designs because everybody has a different way of shooting pictures and they have a different connection with a product. So you're getting lots of different experiences, is what I would like to call it, rather than just the stock standard photo shoot with a photographer and a stylist who are going to put their own spin on things.
That's 100% right. So we provide a consistent source of fresh content. So when you come to us, we'll match you with a handful of people who we think will do a great job, and then subsequently, if you come back to us again, we can use the same people if you really love them, or we can rotate them and get different people to do the same thing. So it's like having your own creative community, constantly creating new content for your brand.
Okay, so tell us, why is visual content important? Like, apart from obviously having some pretty pictures on your website, why is it actually important to a retail brand or to any brand?
Sure. So especially online brands, it's the first thing people see. And they make a decision based on those first images they see as to how they perceive your brand, whether it's high quality, low quality, is it cheap, is it fast? All those things we process in milliseconds when we first see a website for the first time. So those first impressions count.
So you were talking then about the impressions. I guess that's the connection that you want your customer to have and to make them stay and look a little bit longer around your website.
Exactly. So it's there's some really interesting data around adding the types of style content, UGC style content that we provide. If you add that to, say, product pages that only have a product shot with a white background, it can increase click-through rates and add to cart rates by 300 to 400% in some cases.
Well, we love stats. We love to talk about stats. So just a few clarifications there. UGC is user-generated content, which means that essentially the community is out there making content for you. And it can be images, it can be things like reviews and testimonials, and 300 to 400% increase if you have something more than a flat lay or a deep etch picture.
Exactly. And you're right. User-generated content is content that's been generated by your customers, by your users. And we sit in this sweet spot that's a mix of having a brief and being something that's on brand and that UGC style. So you still have an element of control to what types of content, what you'd like to see. There's certain things that can't be included in the shot. but the style is that UGC style. So one of the challenges that comes with using UGC is licensing. So you can't just obviously download an image from Instagram and put it up on your website or use it in advertising. You need to get the license for that, and that can be complex, time-consuming process. So creating the content from scratch in the right style, but also adding in, what you'd like to see and your brand and your brief to it is the sweet spot that we try to play in.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about a brief that you would give, because this is going to be new to a lot of people who are listening. I'm sure as we go along, they're going to get really excited about what UGC, when we're talking about visual marketing, can do for their brand. I mean, heck, if I can get somebody to outsource all those bloody curated social media, Instagram pictures, if I could work out a way to do that for my brand, I would be so in it. I just haven't worked it out yet. Which is bringing me to my question. When you ask somebody to fill in a brief, they've decided to go ahead with you, what kinds of things do you ask them? And the reason I ask you this is because the people who are listening are going to be sitting there thinking, but I don't know what I don't know. Like, I can give you my product and I can tell you a little bit about my brand, but if I'm not creatively empowered, then I'm kind of hoping, if you've listened to this podcast a few times, you know that I give stuff to my graphic designer and I just say, can you make it look pretty? And we've been working together long enough that she can. But for the people listening, this may be a little bit scary.
Yeah, so that's actually the situation where we do our best work, in my view. So when we have businesses that have that kind of that situation where they might not have, a detailed brand strategy and brand guidelines, what we've done is we keep our brief really, really short. So it can be a couple of sentences in the written part of the brief, and then what we do is we ask you to supply images that you like. So there's a space where you can upload images, and you can just scrape them from the internet and find stuff. I like this style, I like this image. A lot of our clients use a Pinterest board as a mood board, and they're really easy to set up. We sort of guides on how to do that if you haven't done it before. And you can literally just go across the internet and add images you've found to this Pinterest board. So once you've done that, you supply that, and based on that, our internal creative team, as well as the network of content creators, they can go and look at that and interpret that and identify what they think is going to work best for your brand. So when they've got more creative freedom, when they don't have a lot of guidelines and direction, that's when they come up with their best work, because they have the space to come up with something that looks amazing.
Oh, I like that. So tell me a little bit about the process. You have a lot of people in your community that you can call on to make these pictures. So how do you work out? Did you say you had 20,000 people?
Yeah.
So how do you work out which of those 20,000 people I should be working with?
Yeah, so it's a mix of tools. So we have some internal analytics and tools that go through and profile all of our content creators when they sign up. And we ask them important questions, not only on the style of content they work and what their skills are, but we ask them what they're passionate about, what types of industries, what types of brands, what they value. So, for instance, we had a client that sold vegan food, so we matched him with a vegan content creator because we think things like that are important as well. So the process is, once you purchase an image package from us and submit the brief, we go through and use those analytics to sort of scale that 20,000 down to a top maybe 50 or so. And then we'll go through those top people, and we actually have our internal creative people go and look at and identify the right match from that short list. So it's a mix of technology and expert creative talent that work for us.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the process when I purchase an image pack from you. So just to clarify, you aren't like some companies where I pay an, in air quotes, influencer to take a picture and post it on their Instagram. You're solely creating photos for me?
Yep, exactly. So the difference between influencers and what we do is influencers, you get a 2-for-1 in effect. What they do is once you pay them, they'll go and create the content, and they'll also post the content. So you're getting distribution and messaging and awareness of your brand, as well as the content they've produced. So that's the benefit of influencers. The downside and the underlying assumption is that an influencer, by their definition, have a certain number of followers. And the assumption is that the number of followers correlates to the quality of their content. So you can have an influencer with 1 million followers, but their content they create is terrible. And vice versa, you can have people that have 50 followers that create amazing content, but they don't have a lot of followers, so they're deemed not an influencer. So what we do, if we've separated that. So putting the distribution of the content aside, all we do is focus on providing content to brands to use in their own channels. So you can use it through your own website, your organic social, your paid advertising. We have clients also using it for point of sale, printed material. We had a client last month using our content for elevator wrappers in a building.
Wow.
So it could be used. Yeah, the images, once you have them, they're yours to use anywhere. So that's the difference between the two.
And that was going to be my next question: is do I actually own them in perpetuity, or do you just own them for like a one-off go?
In perpetuity.
That is super important. If people are listening and you are looking to get somebody to take images for your site, make sure you own them.
Yeah, so just to clarify, we own the images, but each of our clients gets an exclusive license in perpetuity to use it. So right. the reason for that is that sometimes we want to be able to use the images on our website and our marketing material. And if we're ever going to do that, we do check with the client before we do so. But that's the only reason. It's an exclusive license. It's indefinite. One of the issues we identified when we started our company was that licensing was a real headache for people. Going to somewhere like Getty or Shutterstock and seeing pages and pages of different variations and pricing and where you can use it and how you can use it. So what we did is simplify that. So all of our image packages include a digital license where you can use it anywhere online in perpetuity. And then if you want to use the high resolution version for offline use, then it's just an additional fee that you can do per image.
Okay, so let's just back up there to the license part, which was you said that you own the photos.
Yeah.
So at what point is the exclusivity? So when you're saying you own the photos, you might just use them on a testimonial type page or a portfolio page, but you're not going to go out and use them for marketing campaigns other than to promote that client.
No, the client, they're exclusive for that client. We don't resell them to anyone. It's in our contract. We can't resell them to anyone. They're not going to be used anywhere else. But we do use all of that content in our tools and analytics, and we're starting to go down the path of using visual AI and these kind of machine learning algorithms to improve that matching between clients and creatives. So being able to use all that kind of data is internally is important to us. But the content is exclusively licensed to you. Like each time you buy it, it's just for you. No one else uses it. It won't be shared anywhere else. The content creators can't share it. We can't use it, except where we ask permission to do it in our own marketing.
Cool. So we're not going to find our images up on some stock photo site in 6 months?
No, definitely not.
And that is, I guess that's something else to be really conscious of if you're looking at engaging a company, whether it's your company or someone else, to make sure that what are the terms of the use around the images. So let me just ask you another question. If it's a product-based photo shoot, like we were talking about the night lights, does the company send the night lights to those people? They get to send their choice of products to the content creator?
Exactly. We'll provide you with the content creator an address where to ship the products, and the client ship the products directly to them.
Right. And do they get them back?
If need be, we can return them as well.
Okay. Just covering all the bases there.
Yep.
All right. Yep. So tell us, I think retailers are so... they get so frustrated when you send things off to magazines for photo shoots and product call outs and then you just never get it back. I just like to be upfront about what the process looks like.
Yeah, sure. So what would happen if a retailer came to us, you go to our website, you find an image package and choose how many images you'd like. Based on that, you'll receive a link to our brief. Once you've completed that, which normally takes us about 24 to 48 hours, we'll supply you with the addresses to ship your products to. Ship the products there, and then the content's delivered to you within 2 weeks. So it's really straightforward. And the way the content's delivered, you can download all the images. You can purchase individual ones if you want that full high-resolution print version. And we ask you to select the images you like best out of that package, and we use that in subsequent packages with us. So if you come back to us next month, next quarter, we use the content we've already created and your favorites out of that content to provide to the content creators we use next time. So over time, we get to learn what you like, what you don't like, and we constantly improve, no matter whether we're using the same creatives each time or using new people for every project.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's just talk about that a little bit more. So say, for example, I choose 20 photos.
Yep.
Do you give me more than 20 to choose from?
No, we don't. So
Right.
that's what's a little bit different from our model. We have standard packages of 10, 25, or 50 images, and we can do other sizes on demand if need be. But when you purchase, say, 50 images from us, we just provide 50 images. So it's a little bit different from some of the other models that are out there, and there's reasons for that.
Okay. What if I don't like them?
Well, that's a little bit of a risk, I suppose. But what we did is we looked at what was existing in the market, and there's a lot of models out there that are competition based. So you put up a brief and you ask people to go and create images or do some kind of work, create a design, create a logo. You get hundreds back from all these different people, and then you select the one you like best and only pay for that one. So there's a lot of downsides to that model. Firstly, we just fundamentally believed it was the wrong thing to do. So we flipped that on its head and made a decision that when you purchase an image package from us, you are only going to get that image, that number of images. And the way that works is that means the quality of that matching process has to be incredibly high. So we're very particular about who we approve to work on our platform. That's the first step. Then when the content's delivered to us internally, we have internal creative experts, graphic design experts, photography experts that go and check the content and make sure we're happy with the standard of it before we provide it to the client. And so far, the last 18 months, that method has been working. So we've had, for anyone that's familiar with Net Promoter Scores, where everybody asks you that question of how likely you are to recommend the service to a friend or coworker. Our score is in the mid 80s, which means that over 95% of our clients have ranked us either 9 out of 10 out of 10.
That's fantastic. I love it. So then, speaking of the gig economy,
Yeah.
does that mean that every content creator is going to be paid? Because I know with a lot of UGC, it's exactly what you said. The brief goes out, you might get, a plethora of people who submit their design, but it's a win or lose. You either get your picture picked and you get paid, or if you don't get picked, you don't get paid. How does your system work?
Exactly. So ours is very different from that. So every content creator gets paid for every image in our platform. So when we're paid for the 50 image package by our customer, then we go and pay our content creators for 50 images or 10 images each across 5 different content creators or whatever the breakdown may be for that project. So our promise to them is that they're paid for every image we ask them to create for us. And while some people may see the downside from a customer point of view, you could go out there and you might get 500 images on another site and get to choose 50. There's actually an economical benefit to it as well. So if you look at it from the other side, from the content creator or the designer or whoever it may be for these gig economy platforms, the maths is exactly the same. So if they know that if they submit 10 pieces of work for 10 different jobs and they might get paid on average for one of them, they've got to charge 10 times the price for that one to be able to make some kind of living out of it. Whereas in our case, knowing that you're going to get paid for every single piece of content you create, the price can be a lot lower. And the other benefit is knowing you're going to be paid and you have been paid for that piece of content, people care. So if I know I'm being paid for something, I'm going to be incentivized to do a really good job of it. I want the quality to be high because I want people to come back and keep purchasing content from me. So rather than trying to make it a quantity thing where you're trying to produce as much content as possible to hopefully get paid 1 in 10, 1 in 50 times, the promise to our content creators is being paid every time. The quality is much, much higher and the prices per image is a lot more affordable.
And I guess that, like you said, the care factor comes in, but also if they're not having to shoot 50 pictures, they're only having to shoot 10 pictures, the time and the care that they spend on it is going to be, potentially 5 times more because they know that they're getting paid.
Exactly.
That regardless, yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly why we set things up this way. And that's why we've got such happy customers all over the world.
That's fantastic. I really, congratulations, because I know the gig economy can be hard, but the fact that you're out there committing to making sure that everybody gets paid for the effort that they put in, and we're not just spruiking some, lots of people just want exposure. The good old exposure world. You're actually out there making sure that people can earn a living doing this thing, because visual content, I am very visually, I was going to say impaired, but that's not the right word. I'm creatively challenged, okay? So I completely appreciate what great photographers, what great graphic designers, what great content creators can do, because I just know that even on my best day, I couldn't create the worst of what they could ever do.
Yeah.
So I think that it's definitely, there's a whole market of people out there. And let's talk a little bit about the different types of visual content that they are, because people are thinking, all right, I could use this in my social or I could use it on my website. But what different types of visual content do you create and should we be using?
So we do ask, as part of the brief, we ask where the content's going to be used, and we try to sort of adapt to that a little bit. But the images can be used anywhere. So on your website, you obviously know the right banners and the images, that are sort of front and center. Product pages need images to support it. As we mentioned before, the stats really show that it can help sales and conversions by having that styled content supporting your straight product shots. So they're the places on your website that you should be using it. Obviously, social media, being visual content, Instagram is probably the number one. Pinterest is another one, but it goes across all forms of social, whether you're using it on Facebook, messages becoming very popular. So that's the organic social side of things. Then there's also the paid social. So if you're running ads on Facebook or Instagram, the two things that are really important to make that successful are volume and variety. So rather than spending all your money and time on one image and then putting as much money behind that as possible, you're better off getting 50 images and testing them and seeing what resonates with your customers, and then focusing on those handful that really generate the results.
I was going to say, with ads, you can never tell which picture is going to work. Sometimes the most ugliest pictures get the best results.
Exactly. So you still want to have some quality there, but the volume and variety are the two main factors that help. So that paid advertising is another one. EDMs as well. So sending out your email marketing. A lot of people use stock images for that. But if you're thinking long term at building your brand, having images that are about your brand and feature your brand are important. So that's another option. Point of sale material. So if you've got a retail store, if you're selling through a store, having material there, physical material, is another one. So, and the options, there's probably going to be more coming as well. So having great imagery that can be used across any of the channels. And if you see one resonating really well in a channel, so you might put it up an Instagram post and it gets the most likes, then you might take that and feature that somewhere else. Maybe it's on your website or maybe it's in paid advertising. So being able to use them across different channels is important as well.
Yeah, definitely. You said something there about the Pinterest market, and then we talked about website banners, and it made me realize that when you're putting this brief together, and tell me if you have this in your questions, but it is so important to know whether you need landscape or portrait pictures, because essentially on something like Facebook ads or on a website banner, you need a landscape image, but for most e-commerce platforms and for things like Instagram and even Pinterest, you need the portrait images. So making sure you have a mix of both. And I have to say, I have been caught out here. When I got my first lot of photos done for my website, I got so many portrait ones. And then I went to go to the website and I needed all these hero images, all these landscape, and realized I hardly had any. So is that a question that you ask people, the platforms they're intending on using it, so that you can make sure that you get the right, orientation?
Yeah, definitely. So we do ask that. We ask where it's going to be used and if there's a certain orientation. Our default position is to provide a mix. So, we can try to provide content where it can be cropped either way if that's a priority. Or if they don't know where they're going to use it, we'll provide a mix of landscape and portrait and things that can be cropped in different ways. But we do ask that. We ask, what's the purpose of the content, where you're going to be using it, and if there's any specific requirements around landscape or portrait, or it might be other things that we need to know about.
Cool. What's the biggest problem or the biggest obstacle or the biggest mistake that you see people encounter when it comes to visual content?
That's a tough one. I think there's many. It depends on the types of. We work with a variety of markets, right, from big multinational companies through to I'm thinking about starting a Shopify store next week. Help. And depending on the market, we see different mistakes. So I'll start at the top end of the market. I think the mistakes a lot of large brands are making these days are using professional content where it shouldn't be used. So taking a catalog shot from a big retailer and sticky on Instagram, it won't resonate with people. It won't work. People want to see authenticity. They want to see people they relate to. They want to see scenarios they can relate to. So that's a mistake we see quite often. I think when we get to our small clients, again, it's setting up, especially e-commerce stores, setting up either just bad quality imagery on their site and not prioritizing it.
I have to just jump in there because bad quality images, like, I have to speak up about bad quality images. It's just not worth it, guys.
Yeah. So it's really easy when you're starting out to focus on all the tools you need and all the background it's set up. And there's so many different plugins and apps and things that you can put to build up your site, which are all great. But that all comes after somebody, putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and being customer focused. The first thing they see is the images on your site or the videos. So if they're not up to scratch, the rest of it is not performing as well as it could be. So it's using the right content too. So you do need those high quality shots that feature the product with the white background and make it clear what the product is. They're really important. So having those on there, but also supporting it with other types of material like what we do. And the combination of both is where you can get some really good results. So it's using the wrong content in the wrong places is something we see quite often, and just not prioritizing the visuals, which is, it's the welcome mat for your brand. It's the first thing everyone sees, and it's where they're going to make the first impression, and that's going to last.
They are two of probably the most important things. I think that concept of using the right content on the right channel, guys, whether you end up using UGC or not, this is so important because we can all sniff out a stock photo from a mile away. I don't care which one you're using, whether you're using something like Adobe or Deposit Photos, right through to the really arty ones. We can all spot a stock photo. We know what they look like. So that concept of making sure that what people are seeing, they're not just in the back of their mind, they're not just going, that's too curated, that's too stock, that's too boring, that doesn't resonate with me. This is the important thing. And like you were saying, what you show on something like Pinterest is so completely different to what you might put on Instagram as to what you might put on Facebook. And in this day and age of having to be on every platform, it is, I'll put my hand up, I'm certainly one of the people who does this, is just posting everything from Instagram to Facebook and knowing that it's kind of the lazy way because you're trying to get everything covered in as little time as possible, but knowing that some of that stuff is just not going to translate to the end user.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really important to have a sort of testing methodology. So working out what's going to resonate with your customers on what channel and focusing on that rather than just sort of making sure you put something out there. Email's probably the biggest one for me. I'm sure by the time we get through this podcast, everybody that's listening will receive an email that has an image of a laptop with a coffee cup next to it.
The desk with the coffee cup.
The desk shot, exactly.
And the Mac.
Yeah, and it could be any brand. Who knows who it's from? It's just the same image over and over because people feel they need to have an image in there of something.
Yes.
And that's kind of where we've come from, but that's not how marketing is going to work in the future. You're going to have things that are people want personalization. They want to know about your brand. They want something that's relevant to them.
And
I think that's where things are heading.
They want to feel connected. They don't want to feel like your stock photo.
and exactly.
In retail, you can't be stock photo, I don't think. Stock photos have a place, but knowing when and where to use them is where the creative challenged of us sometimes fall down and some don't.
Yep.
Okay, I am sure people are already thinking, this sounds like something that I would like to look at. Guys, I can tell you now, it is not super expensive. It is probably within the realms of everybody who's listening's budget. So where can people find out more about Creatively Squared?
So the first thing to check out is our website, creativelysquared.com. And it's got how everything works. It's got examples of our content. All of our pricing's transparent and upfront. So our images start from $59 Australian per image and go up to $75 Australian per image, depending on the size of the image package you purchase. And again, that's indefinite exclusive license that comes along with all of that.
Yeah, and that's perfectly curated. And you said you were talking about potentially a subscription model later in the year. So if you're listening to this podcast a little bit after it goes out, just be aware that obviously prices may change a little bit, but we're also talking at the moment, at the time of recording, in Australian dollars. So for all you Americans, That's like 25% less.
Yeah, exactly.
With the current exchange rate. So it is a super bargain no matter where you are on the planet.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And just highlighting there, we do have content creators globally. So we've got people in over 100 countries. We've got customers in the US and the UK, in Singapore, in Australia, New Zealand. And we've got the Creative Network to help people with localized content creators anywhere. So it doesn't matter where you are. Feel free to jump on and have a look.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that because I meant to do that and I didn't. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing it. We love a few stats, guys. 300 to 400% increase in add to cart and purchases with visuals on your website. And just knowing that you can build up that engagement with really great content on your social, on your website. So thank you, Scott, for sharing all of that with us.
That's right. Thanks for having me.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bringing Business to Retail podcast. You can find all of the show notes over at selenaknight.com. If you found something that you heard today particularly useful, I'd love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or Stitcher. And of course, feel free to share this episode with someone that you think could benefit by listening to it. Want more retail biz strategies? You can watch the Bringing Business to Retail TV show, where each week I'll answer a question or provide you with a simple, actionable retail biz strategy that you can implement in your business right away. If you have a question or a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Drop my team an email at podcast@selenaknight.com and I'll see you on the next episode. Have a great week.